What's up, everyone? Hey, welcome to this particular video. I'm Josh Smith here. If we haven't met before, thank you for being here. If you're watching this live, thank you, or the recording, thank you. I'm the founder of A Grade Above College Planning, and we've been helping families for maybe about 10 years, a little over 10 years now when it comes to college, getting their children into a great school at a reasonable price, excuse me. So our goal is to help our families get our kids to the right school for the right reasons and at the right price, right? So our vision and our process when it comes to the financial side of it is we want parents to not just be able to save for college, and some of us are fortunate enough to do that. Many of us are not. We haven't been able to set aside a lot of money or on a consistent basis save for our children just due to life, right? Due to just normal demands. So we also focus on, more importantly, saving on the cost of college. So it's not just about saving for college, but also on the cost of college. So any content, any information, any advice, any guidance that I give, whether it be through YouTube, if you're here watching on YouTube, thank you for being here, on Facebook, LinkedIn, or if we ever met face to face. The whole goal is to help you as a parent navigate this process in the most simplified manner, but send your kids off to a great school in the most cost-effective way. So if you are here watching live, again, thank you for being here. If you're watching the recording, thank you for watching it. If you have questions, whether it be live or the recording, whatever platform you're watching this on, please add your questions to the comment. If this is recorded or whatever that might be, we'll definitely reach back out to you and address your question, and we might answer it as I go through. But this particular presentation, the true cost of college, this is going to be geared towards some of our families that have underclassmen, students that are ninth grade, maybe eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th, 11th, maybe first semester, senior year. But if you are a little bit older or further in the process, you can still benefit from this information. But we're going to be talking about some things that, pertain to planning, budgeting, saving. And then we're going to be talking about, obviously, the true cost of college. So because colleges are so expensive today, education is very expensive, super, super competitive, it makes sense to do the proper planning, have the right understanding of your potential, of your students' opportunities as early as possible. So I speak to families all the time, every day. And so many families say, I wish we would have met, a year ago or 2 years ago. And I wish we did too. But for those of you that have younger students, you have an opportunity to learn some things and even meet with me if that's what you want to do, to make sure you're in the best situation possible. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into my presentation. And this is kind of I'm continuing from a few other webinars or lives that I've done where I talked about the new way to save. I kind of went on a bit of a rant talking about how college is so expensive and what you need to do as a parent as far as saving and spending. And I'm kind of continuing on that. You'll see here, let me go ahead and share my screen. I know you're not here to really look at me, but maybe hear what I have to say. So a college education today, the current landscape today, college expenses, when it comes to inflation, is rising anywhere between 5 to 8% across the board, right? So if whatever a specific college you might be considering today and your student is a sophomore in high school, it's probably going to be about 5 to 8% more expensive each year, right? Between now and when they actually go to school. Not just, the tuition, but also living, right? Inflation, we all know what's happening in our economy. And it's just a crazy situation to be in. But just as you prepare, as you go through your process, just understand as you budget that you're going to probably need to budget for a little bit more than what you're anticipating, or make sure that you're earning at least 5 to 8% on your money. So also, when it comes to the average increase for state schools, that's about 8%, right? 5% at its private school counterparts. Now, private schools are usually already more expensive than state schools, but their cost of attendance is not rising at the same rate. So depending on where your student is looking to go, and I usually recommend that you have a balance of both, maybe some state schools as well as some private institutions, but you want to be in the best situation possible, but having the right expectation is one of the ways that you can definitely do that. So jumping ahead, the total cost of attendance, and this is kind of again, across the board, this is not, identifying one specific school, but a state college could cost about $21,000 a year on average, right? And a private school right around double, about $42,000 a year on average. And we just talked about that cost going up. So one senior, for example, a typical family, one senior that is ready to go to college, 5 years in a state school, and typically students are going for about 5 to 6 years. Most students are not really finishing in 4 years, but let's assume it's 5 years at 21,000. You got a sophomore that's a little bit younger, right? And maybe they'll be going to a private school where they usually can get out a little sooner in a private school compared to its state school counterpart at 4 years. But hypothetically, between two kids in your household, you're looking at about $345,000 in your overall cost of college, cost of attendance. 5 years for one student, 4 years for another, which is pretty crazy, assuming a 6% annual increase. So maybe a little bit higher than 5, but definitely lower or less than 8%. But 345,000 is the potential cost. Now, what kind of impact would that have on your overall savings? We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides. But before making any college plans, there are a few things, right, you have to know. And I try to tell families this all the time. It's one, how much will it cost, right? Obviously, what impact will that have, right, on our other financial goals? The other things that we want to do as a family, as a couple. Maybe we want to retire at some point. Maybe we have other children that we got to get through college. Maybe it's just going to have a crazy impact on our lifestyle, right? I talked to a family not too long ago, and they're taking money out of their 401k, and that's not uncommon for families to, want to tap into their retirement or maybe refinance their home. So you really want to, consider all these variables, right? All these possibilities and the impact that college is going to have on your financial well-being. Most importantly, when we work with families, we try to obviously make sure the student is going to be in the best situation possible, but we're constantly focused on keeping mom and dad, the parent, in a healthy financial position as well as they go through this particular process. So if what you thought to be true about financial aid turned out not to be, when would you like to know? Now, this is also good for some of our students that are a little older. When we have those seniors or even college students. I remember this is mainly for underclassmen, but when it comes to financial aid, there's so many families out there that think they make too much or they have too much and they'll never qualify. Now, that is partially true, but it's not completely accurate. I mean, every situation is going to be different. And one thing I will say, if you're listening to this, you definitely want to stop getting your information from just these general platforms. If you're on a Facebook, maybe Facebook group, or you're watching a YouTube video, it's good to have a good basis, a good, foundational information, but you always want to make sure you talk to someone or have a deep understanding of your unique situation and based on what you guys are looking to do. One of the worst things you can do is follow everybody in a certain direction only to come to find out that their situation was way different from yours. And you could have been better off if you got, legitimate advice for your personal, unique circumstances. So anyhow, when it comes to, the myth of financial aid, or some of the myths, let's go over some of the common ones. So your income is too high to qualify for financial aid, where income is but one of 7 factors, right, used to determine aid eligibility, one of 7. And then when it comes to private schools that are more expensive than the state schools, and we talked a little bit about that earlier, and sticker price, they are, but sometimes private schools could be, right, the same. You can get a private school education for close to the same price that you could a state school, but you also have your student has the potential to be done sometime sooner, right, statistically. And depending on the private school, maybe it's a good opportunity from a networking standpoint and a better return on your investment. So you also want to focus on some of those other things other than just the sticker price. But a lot of times private schools have a lot more money to offer their students. So even though the sticker price might be higher than the state school counterpart, you could end up paying significantly less or about the same if your student is the right fit for that particular college. So Debt load will help financial aid need. So this is not a lot of families think this initially, and it's less common today versus when I was speaking to families maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But it's still worth mentioning. Just because you may carry a lot of debt, right, does not necessarily mean you're going to be in a more financial aid favorable position. So unfortunately, if you make $150,000 and you live in a state like California or New York, you're not really going to be receiving much of a break just because you live in a place that is, very expensive compared to the other parts of the country. But when it comes to debt, the only time carrying more debt can be beneficial when it comes to aid eligibility if your debt ratio or your equity in a rental or a vacation home was, you had a high debt amount, right? So you had less equity because you're carrying a high debt balance on that particular property. That could be beneficial. That means that there's less equity that would be assessed towards you or towards your students' financial aid eligibility. But for the most part, carrying medical bill debt or revolving debt doesn't necessarily help you. Now, in certain situations, if it's a medical expense or a medical debt, sometimes you can submit an appeal, right? And talk about or let the college know about your extenuating circumstance. But generally speaking, carrying more debt is not necessarily a beneficial thing when it comes to aid eligibility. And even if it were, you really have to evaluate carrying a credit card balance at a 15-20% interest rate or more, and what that actually, impact that has on you compared to the small, difference that it will make in your students' aid eligibility. So, but anyhow, these are some of the myths that we want to debunk. So the impact of college expenses. So we talked about, you have a typical, family, right? 45 and 46, mom and dad, and they want to retire one day at 65. Current combined income is about 175,000. Non-retirement assets that they have saved is about 138,000. Two college-bound children, right? A high school senior, as we talked about a little earlier, 5 years at a state school, and then a sophomore in high school, that's going to be about 4 years at a private school. So they have a couple years to go for the younger one, and they're getting ready for their older, student. So when it comes to the cost, we're looking at, again, at 344,000, assuming a 6% cost of attendance increase on an annual basis. Now, let's talk about the impact that particular cost might have on that couple's retirement. So a $344,000 education expense will probably cost them about $789,000 in retirement money, just based on opportunity costs. So just remember, when you spend or when you pay for a specific thing like college, right? We consider this a major capital purchase. Is you always got to factor in the fact that not only is it going to cost you $340,000, but it's also going to cost you what that $340,000 can do for you, right? If you can earn, and this is an assumption here based on a 5% rate of return. So if you got a 5% rate of return, and most people feel they can get about a 5% rate of return long term, over 10, 20, or even 30 years, if it's, from a retirement standpoint. So $345,000 at a 5% rate of return is, the opportunity cost is closer to $800,000 loss in retirement income or retirement funds. That is a big cost. So it not only costs you the sticker price or whatever you're paying from a cost of attendance standpoint, but it's also costing you what that money could have done for you in retirement. And you can see the numbers at the bottom that we use for that particular projection. So it's something to really, really think about. And when I show or share this information with parents one-on-one, or we talk about interest rates and whatnot, then it really starts to hit home. It's like, wow, like I didn't even think about that. I knew I was gonna have to pay 120,000, but I didn't know that, it was really going to cost me more like, double that or almost triple that, depending on my interest rates and my time horizon. So understanding the impact of college expenses and the true cost is really important. So there's a price you pay and there's a cost, that you make, or a cost to you that may not be equivalent to the price that you pay. So when it comes to a typical approach, and this is what most families do every single day or every year, right? So they pay for college costs with their current savings, right? And then they, once funds are pretty much gone or exhausted, they look for opportunities to borrow, sometimes federal or private. Now, when it comes to federal and private, I've done videos on this. And the reason why you will go federal is because they have more flexible repayment options. But we know that a lot of that could be changing, with current administration. And then private loans typically offer more favorable interest rates. So depending on your preference, right, what you feel is best long term, you would pretty much go one way or the other. But private loans, if you can get approved for a private loan, typically will offer lower interest rates than its federal counterpart, which is right around 9.1% on the federal side. So a lot of people will get a second job or try to, increase their workload so they have additional income. And when it comes to aid eligibility, that is kind of counterproductive. But you really have to go about that based on your student situation and the school that they're looking to apply to. And then lastly, they will look for help in completing some of the financial aid forms and or providing financial aid data. And this is kind of backwards, right? So we usually want to start with help. If you don't know what you're doing, have a consultation, speak with someone, work with someone, and then get the right advice and the guidance when it comes to what you should do on the financial side of things. With what we try to explain to a lot of families is the financial aid forms, for the most part, the FAFSA is pretty simple and self-explanatory. The CSS profile, which is required for most private schools and or highly selective universities, that could be a little bit more complicated. But the form itself is not, completing the form is not as important, I would say, as planning for that form, right? So it's almost like doing your taxes. We want to do the tax planning before we file our taxes, so we know we are in the best situation that we could possibly be in before we actually have to pay that bill, before we complete those forms. Now, we know we may have to pay something, but we just want to make sure. I spoke to a family every day. It seems like I speak to a family where I'm noticing little things here and there where they could have shaved maybe $6,000, $7,000, $15,000 off, their students. I would say increase their students' aid eligibility. So it's the planning that goes into financial aid, not so much the forms that people tend to need the most help with. So college planning 101, keeping it pretty simple. ABC, and I'm gonna add a D. I'm at a bonus one here, but apply for financial aid no matter what, right? So do the planning. That's a big thing that I pretty much emphasize to a lot of people. But no matter what, regardless of your income, your situation, make sure you complete the financial aid forms. A lot of merit scholarships are typically reserved for families who complete the financial aid forms. College say, hey, we're not going to give you this merit money until we get what we need from you, not just the college application, but we need the financial aid information as well. So make sure you do it regardless of your situation or what you think you are going to qualify for. Now, you want to become cash flow efficient, right? Avoid wealth transfers. And I'll do some more videos on that and talk more about it. But wealth transfers are basically avoid areas where you're going to be losing money, right? Unnecessarily, right? And unknowingly. So again, I was talking about financial aid, the planning that goes into completing the forms. We want to maximize aid eligibility because even if you overpay $5,000 or $6,000 per year, that's $20,000 to sometimes $30,000 depending on where your student goes to school and how often or how high that inflation rate is at that particular college, right? So you don't want to overpay. You want to eliminate wealth transfers, meaning money leaving your account. Whether it be in any kind of unnecessary expenses, whatever that might be, leaving your account, your wealth, and going towards something else unnecessarily, right? So if college costs $20,000, we want to pay $20,000 or maybe 15. You don't want to pay 22, 25, or even 30,000 unnecessarily. So become cash flow efficient and avoid any wealth transfers. But again, that goes into the planning that takes place before you complete the financial aid forms. And then C, credit opportunities. So you want to determine borrowing sources if that's what you're going to do. Now, I come across families that, have 529, but they may not have as much money saved for, like all years that they're going to need it for. With this particular student, they may have 50% of college taken care of. And the question comes up, how should we do this? Should we use our 529 first? Should we, go ahead and take out loans? And it really depends on a few different things. But for example, one thing to consider, if you're earning 7 or 8% or a reasonable rate of return in your 529, or you feel confident that you can continue to do that, at least for the next year, it could make more sense to take out a student loan if the interest rate is going to be lower than what you can earn in a 529. That gives your 529 a little bit more time to cook, a little bit more time to grow, and then you use those funds later in the later years while you have a higher balance. But vice versa, if you feel like you're in a very volatile market and this is the time to cash out, it may make sense to take out the 529, liquidate, and use it for school. But understand and evaluate your credit opportunities and borrowing sources. And it doesn't always have to be a private loan or a student loan. There's families that have equity in their properties, right? In their home. There's families that have a line of credit, right? There's families that have assets like cash value life insurance that they can take a loan or borrow against. But you really need to determine and understand the pros and cons of all of your borrowing resources, I would say, and then determine which source is going to be the best for your situation today and in the long run. And the best borrowing source on the surface is typically going to be one that allows your assets to continue to grow, right? To continue to compound and have uninterrupted growth, and where your growth is going to be ideally higher than the interest rate that you're borrowing, and that's kind of obvious. So then D, the bonus one here is you want to avoid depleting assets. Let that be your last resort. If you want to retire at some point, you got money saved in a retirement account. And as well, if you have, like I said, if you have a property, now those are sources that you can typically tap into, but you want to let those be your last options, right? You don't want to liquidate or tap into, your assets that are going to be earmarked for retirement or other important financial obligations. But this is as simple as ABC, right? ABCD. So what are the next steps? Well, the next steps is you would be very wise, right, to calculate your out-of-pocket expenses beforehand. So you must be aware of the type and the amount of help you can expect from the colleges that your student is considering. So this is what I talked about in previous videos. Even if you have an 8th grader, a 9th grader, if college were to begin tomorrow, this is a key question. If college were to begin tomorrow, what am I expected to pay? Do you know what you are expected to pay? That based on your current situation. Now, we understand that it's going to change, right? You may earn more money, jobs may change, opportunities may change. You may lose a job, right? But just today, just to give you a good understanding, right? If college were to begin today, what am I expected to pay? Number one. Number two, is there anything that I can do to reduce that amount? Is there anything that I can do as a family now that we know and we have a little bit of time to reduce that amount? Now, what that's going to say is either yes or no, right? Yes, you can. And if you can, how, right? And at what benefit? To what benefit? Yes, we can reduce that amount. We know we're expected to pay $50,000 based on our situation, but we might be able to get that down to 40 or 35. And if so, how? Right? So understand that. And let's say you can't reduce your expectation, what we call it is your projected SAI, student aid index. If you cannot reduce that amount, then it still gives you enough information where you can start budgeting, right? You can set a targeted goal. You know that, if you're going to save money today and your student is a sophomore or a freshman in high school, you ideally want to earn at least 5, maybe to 8% interest rate or return on whatever your savings are going to be. That way you keep up with the rising cost of attendance or the inflationary inflation target for specific universities that you might be considering. But this is really important to know today and not wait until, they want to apply, you start getting the bill, and now all of a sudden there's a scramble for scholarships and everything else. So here we go right here. So when I was mentioning a little earlier, if you overpaid for college by, let's say, in this example, we could say $15,000. let's go back and let's say we overpay for college by $5,000 per year. A little calculation, but we're going to say 5,000 per year, which would be, let's call it 25,000 over 5 years. You paid an extra $5,000 per year more than what you should have paid, right? And if you know or feel confident that you can earn about a 6% return on your money, and let's say retirement is 10 years from now, but you're going to be retired at least, in 20 years later, right? 20 years out. So that same 25,000 over 5 years that you overpaid unnecessarily, right? Unknowingly, is actually going to cost you more like $57,000, almost $58,000 in lost retirement income. More than double, right? So, and that's just $5,000 a year. There's some families out there that are overpaying maybe $10,000, double that. So let's say $50,000 at 6%. $115,000. So understand the impact of overpaying every dollar that is going towards your student's education, which I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. What I'm saying is you shouldn't overpay more than your fair share. Every dollar that you overpay is a dollar that you're losing from your retirement or your future lifestyle, and that I would say growth on that dollar, what that dollar can actually do for you. You know what I mean? So it's not just the dollar, it's the dollar times the interest rate over that time frame. So really important to understand. And this is the true cost of college. This is what a lot of families don't realize, and come to find out, you might be able to send your kid to a great school, right? And have more than enough that you would ever need for retirement with the right planning and the proper understanding. So that was just an example. So only with an accurate projection of true out-of-pocket expectations can you accurately assess, right, your ability to pay for college. You can the impact that college is going to have on other financial goals and the best financial approach for you. Again, you don't want to just take general information that's out there for the masses or the general public. Now, it's good to educate yourself, but with that education, you have a responsibility to educate yourself on your unique personal situation and your unique opportunities, whereas you may have certain opportunities that other families don't, or they may have opportunities that are not really available to you. You got to get clear on what steps are best for someone in your specific unique situation. So, and then this is pretty much concludes the slides that I want to go over with you. The next video, I'm going to be talking about basically how to pay for college. I'm going to go into financial aid a little bit more, college funding a little bit more, but I'm talking about the 7 factors that determine, aid eligibility. And then maybe I may touch on some scholarships, but the whole idea is to give you a good foundation of, information to get you to start thinking in the right direction, start understanding and having the right expectations that, will benefit your family, not just today, but in the long run. I appreciate you for being here. Thank you for watching this video. Any questions, leave them in the comment. Any feedback, please add it to the comment. If you like this video, share it with someone that could benefit from it. I thank you much for being here. And until next time, have a great rest of your day. We'll see you in the next video. Thank you.